So good morning students. So in this video I am going to explain about the introduction to IC. So subject we are going to study this in this semester is the linear integrated circuits. Our subject code is AC8453 linear integrated circuits. So what is the integrated circuit? The concept of IC is first introduced in 1958, so which helped in the miniaturization of a lot of components like mobiles and computers and many more devices in digital world. So first electronic devices in the world is the vacuum tube. So a digital era started with the invention of vacuum tubes in 1950. So the application of the vacuum tubes as follows. So diode rectifier and transistor amplifier. So despite the first element, electronic element is vacuum tube, it's suffering from some drawbacks. So drawbacks are the vacuum based computers are very rare and expensive one. So these were the large size. So these are drawbacks that leads to the development of further stages in the electronic world. So these drawbacks of vacuum tubes lead to the development of or invention of the transistor. So the present day electronics is the invention of transistor in 1947. So William B. Schottky and Waiter and John Bragg is the main inventor of the transistor. So these are advantages of transistor. So generally transistor faster in use and smaller in size and cost effective and less power consuming and reliable. So next one is IC invention. So why the IC was invented? The invention of integrated circuits revolutionized the use of computers. So due to the small dimension and low cost and very high reliability, even the common man is familiar with applications like smartphone, laptops. So the first IC has been introduced in 1960 by Texas Instruments and Fairchild Semiconductors. So Jack Kilby, making IC while he was working for Texas Instruments, completed it in 12th September 1958. So he made his IC using germanium as a semiconductor chip. The invention won him the Nobel Prize for the physics in year 2000. So what is IC? Why we go for IC? So what are the parameters so leads to the development of the IC? So next we are going to discuss. So generally the integrated circuit is a miniature and low cost electronic circuit, so consisting of active and passive components. So the discrete circuit consists of transistor and resistor and diodes and capacitor and many other discrete devices. So each of them soldered on and printed circuit boards and occupy large space. And moreover, there is a chance for the loose contacts and bed soldering. So this is often difficult to detect after assembly. So in this case of IC, since the connection is part of the IC package, so there are few external connections to solder. So in case of the discrete circuit, the reliability is very less. So another drawback is solder components will show less reliability due to the use of many discrete components. So both these important factors urged engineers to invent the microcircuits to have a more reliability and has consumed less space. So correct definition of IC. So IC is a miniature and low cost electronic circuit consisting of active and passive components that are irreparably joined together on single crystal silicon. So all the circuit components, both active and passive components, so their interconnections are manufactured on the top of the single chip silicon. So advantages of IC. So these are advantages of ICs. So miniaturization and hence increase the equipment density. The IC technology offers the reduction in size. So this is obvious because of large number of discrete components can be deposited on the chip. Next one is the cost reduction. So hundreds of the external circuits can be built simultaneously on single silicon wafer. So the circuit cost is reduced. Third one is the increased system reliability. So in case of IC, the connection of IC is a part of the package. There are few external connections to solder, so the reliability is very high. Fourth one is the increased operating speed because of the absence of the parasitic capacitor effects. Then generally the ICs are consumes only less power, so the reduction is the power consumption. Last one is the improved functional performance. So even though the IC has some more advantages, it also has some drawbacks. First one is some complex IC may be costly if such integrated circuits are used roughly and become faulty. So they have to be replaced by the new one. They cannot be repaired. This is a main drawback of disadvantage of. If there any fault occurs in the IC, they have to be replaced. So they cannot be repaired. This is a main drawback. The power rating of the most IC does not exceed the more than 10 watts. So that's not possible to manufacture high power of IC. This is the main drawback of IC. So some components like transformers and inductors cannot be integrated on the IC. So they have to be connected externally to semiconductor pins. It is not possible to fabricate the capacity that has exceed even 30 picofarad. Okay, so these are 4 drawbacks of IC. So in order to make the circuit fully operative, the pins in the IC must be used to supply voltage. The input and output connections are also some external components according to the needs of manufacturer. So the IC classification. So the IC can be classified on the basis of the chip size. The IC complexity has advanced from the small scale integration and medium scale integration, then large scale integration, finally the very large scale integration. So the small scale integrations having a range of the gates of 3 to 30 gates, and medium scale integration consisting of the gates of the ranging from 30 to 300. So whereas the large scale integration having a range of the gates from 300 to 3000. Then very large scale integration having a transistor from the gates of more than 3000 gates. So these are IC classification. So types of the IC. Generally on the basis of application of the IC, the 2 types of, namely linear integrated circuits and digital integrated circuits. So this diagram illustrates the classification of the IC. So IC generally classified as a monolithic circuit and hybrid circuit. Further, the monolithic circuit further classified as a bipolar circuit and unipolar circuit. So the bipolar circuit is further classified as a PN junction isolation and dielectric isolation circuit. The unipolar circuit is a MOSFET and JFET. So what is a linear IC? So linear IC is mainly used in the case as which one performs the amplification and essentially linear operation of signals. It's also known as linear IC or analog IC. So analog IC deals with continuously varying quantities such as temperature and process. So examples of the analog IC or linear IC is operation amplifier and voltage regulators. The digital IC. The digital IC performs the circuit function that dealing with discrete quantities and integer and fraction number. The digital IC information represented by the binary digits, or that means the bits. A bit may assume the either one of the values or 0 or 1. The digital IC involves the logic gates or memory. For the application, the computers and calculators microprocessors may be used as a digital IC. Thank you. This is all about the introduction about IC. Thank you.